It was the first day of summer in Australia. December 1st, 1948. The sun rose slowly over Somerton Beach, a peaceful stretch of sand just a few miles south of Adelaide, in South Australia. At first, the morning seemed normal. A few people were out for early walks. The waves were calm. The sky was clear. But as daylight spread across the shore, something unusual caught the eye of a couple walking by. There, leaning up against a low stone seawall that separated the beach from a line of bushes and dunes, was a man. He was lying back, with his legs stretched out and his feet crossed neatly at the ankles. His head was resting gently against the wall. From a distance, he looked like he was just sleeping. Perhaps someone who had too much to drink the night before and decided to rest. But as people got closer, they noticed something was wrong. The man wasn't breathing. He wasn't moving. He was dead. The police were called to the scene. They found the man well-dressed in a white shirt, a red and blue tie, a brown knitted pullover, and a gray-brown jacket. His trousers were clean and pressed. His shoes were shiny and well cared for. He didn't look like someone who was homeless or sick. In fact, he looked like someone who had taken care of himself. But there was one strange detail. Every single label had been carefully cut from his clothing. No tags. No brand names. Nothing to tell them where his clothes were made or bought. It was as if someone had gone out of their way to erase any clue about who he was. In his pockets, police found a few ordinary items. A train ticket from Adelaide station to Henley Beach that had never been used, a used bus ticket, an American-made comb, a packet of chewing gum, a box of Bryant and May matches, and a half-smoked cigarette resting on the collar of his jacket. There was no wallet, no money, no identification card, no keys, nothing else. His hands were clean. His fingernails were neatly trimmed. There were no signs of a struggle, no bruises, no blood. The scene gave no clues to how or why he had died. A pathologist was called to examine the body. He said the man was probably around 40 to 45 years old. He was in good health and looked fit. His hands were soft and didn't show signs of hard labor. His teeth were odd. He was missing some molars, and his incisors were unusually shaped. The man's spleen was 3 times the normal size. His stomach showed signs of bleeding. There was food in his system, a meat pie eaten a few hours before death. The doctor believed the man might have been poisoned, maybe by a strong, fast-acting drug that didn't leave behind chemical traces. But nothing conclusive could be found. Toxicologists could not detect any poison in his blood, organs, or urine. The death was a medical mystery. The doctor called it the most unusual case he had ever seen. Soon, the man's body was embalmed to preserve it for further study. A photograph was taken. His image was published in newspapers across the country. Still, nobody came forward to identify him. No one recognized the face. He had no missing person record. Posters were put up in nearby towns. The story made national headlines. People began calling him the Unknown Man. The mystery had started to capture the imagination of the public, but there were still no answers. On January 14th, about 6 weeks after the man was found, a new lead came in. The staff at the Adelaide railway station reported an unclaimed suitcase. It had been left in the luggage room on November 30th, the day before the man's body was discovered. The timing was important. The suitcase had no tags, but police believed it belonged to the dead man. Inside the suitcase were more clues and more questions. There were clothes, but again, all labels had been removed or scratched out. One piece, a necktie, had a name stitched on it, T-Keen, but the police couldn't find anyone with that name connected to the case. Other items included a shaving brush, a stenciling kit, scissors, a table knife that had been reshaped like a tool, and a small screwdriver. There was also a pair of slippers and a dressing gown. Nothing stood out as unusual on its own, but together, they painted a strange picture. It was a kind of luggage you might expect from a traveler or a tradesman, but there was no clear direction or purpose in the collection of objects. The name Keen led nowhere. It was a dead end. The police even considered that the name had been left there on purpose, to throw off the investigation. In every other place, the labels had been carefully removed. Why would one name be left behind? The public grew more curious. Rumors began to spread. Some people thought he was a lost traveler. Others believed he had been robbed and killed. But the police had found no signs of robbery or violence. Then there were the whispers that he might have been a spy. This was 1948, just after World War II and at the start of the Cold War. People were nervous. Espionage was in the news. The man's sharp dress, mysterious death, and the lack of identity made him seem like someone from a spy novel. The idea didn't seem so crazy anymore. Then, something strange happened. On January 22nd, a pathologist took another look at the dead man's trousers and discovered a hidden pocket sewn into the waistband. It was very small and very hard to notice. Inside was a tiny, tightly rolled scrap of paper. It had 2 printed words on it. Tamam Shud. The words were in a typeface commonly used in books. They looked like they had been torn out of a printed page. The phrase Tamam Shud is Persian. It means ended or finished. It was a final line in certain editions of a book called The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, a collection of poems written by a Persian philosopher in the 12th century and translated into English in the 19th century. The poems talk about the meaning of life, the passing of time, and the mystery of death. They are reflective, emotional, and deeply philosophical. Now, this mysterious man was dead on the beach, with the final words of a famous book hidden in his clothes. Was it a message? A suicide note? A code? Or something else entirely? The police issued a public request. They asked anyone who had a copy of the Rubaiyat to check if a page had been torn out. For days, nothing came in. Then, in late July, 7 months after the man was found, a local man walked into a police station with something strange. He said that around the time of the man's death, he had parked his car just a few blocks from Somerton Beach. One day, after leaving his office, he noticed a copy of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam lying on the back seat of his car. He had no idea how it got there. It wasn't his. He assumed someone had accidentally dropped it in. He kept the book, thinking little of it, until he saw the police appeal. The detectives examined the book. It matched the missing page. The piece of paper with Tamam Shud had been torn from this exact copy. Even the torn edge matched the scrap found in the man's trousers. But there was more. Inside the back cover of the book, someone had written something by hand. A string of letters. It looked like a code. There were also a few more things written in pencil, including a phone number. This wasn't just a book. It was now the center of a growing mystery, one that would only get deeper with each passing discovery. The dead man had no name, no ID, and no cause of death. But now he had left behind a secret message, and perhaps a link to someone still living. The case was no longer just a local mystery. It had become one of the strangest unsolved deaths in Australian history. Tamam Shud. It is finished. But for investigators, it was only the beginning. The discovery of the book, The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, was a turning point. For months, investigators had searched for answers. Now they had in their hands the very copy that matched the torn paper found in the dead man's hidden pocket. Tamam Shud. The words read, "It is finished." The torn edge of the paper fit perfectly with the missing page in the book. There was no doubt this was the source. But the book held more secrets. Inside the back cover, faintly written in pencil, were 5 lines of letters. They looked like a secret code. No real words, no obvious meaning, just random combinations of capital letters spread across 5 lines. The second line had been crossed out, suggesting the writer had made a mistake. Investigators were now dealing with something that seemed to go beyond an ordinary death. First, a man with no name. Then, a hidden note. Now, a mysterious cipher that no one could understand. Here's what the code looked like. Ragobabd, Mliawi, Tbimpinit, Mliaboayak. In Samsgab, police sent the code to naval intelligence, believing they might be able to decipher it. Experts at the time reviewed it and concluded it was likely not random, but they couldn't crack it. They said it seemed to have structure, like a real cipher, but they would need more context to understand its meaning. Without a key or more examples, they were stuck. The mystery deepened. Also inside the book was a local telephone number, written in pencil on the inside rear cover. The number belonged to a woman who lived in the Adelaide suburb of Glenelg. not far from where the man's body was found. Her name was Jo Thompson, though she was listed in the phone book under the name Justin, a variation of her first name that she often used. This was the first real link to another person in the entire investigation. Police went to her house. Jo was a nurse and had once served in the military. She lived quietly with her young son. When the detectives asked if she recognized the book, she paused. She said she had once owned a copy of the Rubaiyat, but it had gone missing. When shown the book found in the car, she couldn't confirm if it was hers. But when asked about the dead man, things became even stranger. The police showed Jo Thompson a plaster cast of the man's face. She didn't faint, but she reacted strongly. According to the officer present, she seemed shocked, almost like she knew who he was. But when asked directly, she claimed she didn't know the man at all. The officers weren't convinced. One later said she appeared to be on the verge of giving the whole thing away. Yet, despite the strange reaction, Jo stuck to her story. She had no idea who the man was. It didn't help that she lived just 400 meters from where the man was found. That alone seemed too much to be a coincidence. The connection to Jo raised many new questions. Could the Somerton Man have been in love with her? Was he a former partner? A jilted lover? Or someone who had come to see her, only to die mysteriously just blocks away from her home? Jo admitted that she had once given a copy of the Rubaiyat to a man named Alf Boxall, whom she had met during the war. She said they had stayed in touch for a while, but she hadn't seen him in years. The police immediately thought they had a breakthrough. Maybe the dead man was Alf Boxall. They tracked Boxall down in Sydney. But when they found him, alive and well, the mystery only grew stranger. Boxall still had the copy of the Rubaiyat that Jo had given him. Inside the front cover, in her handwriting, was a verse and her nickname, Justin. The book was complete, no pages missing, and Boxall had no connection to the man found on the beach. Another dead end. Now, the case was back where it started. The book was real. The note was real. Jo knew more than she let on, but nothing could be proven. The Somerton Man remained unidentified. As months passed, the public fascination grew. Some believed it was suicide, that the man had come to see Jo one last time, and when rejected, had taken his own life using a rare, undetectable poison. But no bottle was ever found. No note. And even suicide didn't explain the removed labels, the fake name, or the code. Others thought it was murder, that the man had been poisoned by someone who knew what they were doing, someone who knew how to use a toxin that left no trace. Perhaps it was someone from Jo's past. Or maybe she had nothing to do with it at all. Then there was the spy theory. It was the height of the Cold War. Australia had close ties with British and American intelligence. Adelaide was home to several sensitive military sites, including Woomera, where rocket testing took place. The man's strange belongings, the coded message, the missing identity, all of it reminded people of espionage. Could the Somerton Man have been a spy, a courier carrying secret messages, or maybe a foreign agent caught in something bigger than himself? The idea wasn't far-fetched. There were stories at the time of agents using invisible ink, microdots, and poetic references as code. The Rubaiyat, with its philosophical themes, may have been used to carry hidden messages. The scrap of paper reading Tamam Shud could have been a final message, or a signal, but no evidence was ever found to prove this. No agency admitted to knowing him. No link to espionage was ever confirmed. In June 1949, more than 6 months after his death, the Somerton Man was buried in West Terrace Cemetery in Adelaide. A small ceremony was held. Only a few officials attended. His grave was marked with a simple plaque that read, "Here lies the unknown man who was found at Somerton Beach, December 1st, 1948. The police kept a plaster cast of his face and upper torso, a death mask. It was a common method at the time for unidentified people, in the hope that someone might recognize him in the future. But as years passed, no one came forward. His identity remained a mystery. The case slowly faded from the headlines, but never completely disappeared. Over the decades, new theories emerged. Some thought he was a Russian spy. Others said he was a victim of a secret affair gone wrong. There were even claims that Jo's son, Robin, bore a strange resemblance to the Somerton Man. Some believed he might have been the child's father, though nothing was proven at the time. In 2009, a retired police detective named Jerry Feltus reopened the case unofficially. He interviewed witnesses, reviewed old records, and wrote a book on the mystery. He remained convinced that Jo Thompson knew more than she admitted. DNA testing was considered, but the body had been buried for decades. Still, the mystery refused to rest. For over 70 years, the case remained one of Australia's most baffling unsolved deaths. A man with no name, a book with no owner, a code with no solution, and a woman with a secret she may have taken to her grave. Tamam Shud. It is finished. But the questions were not. For more than 70 years, the identity of the man found on Somerton Beach remained one of Australia's greatest unsolved mysteries. He was called the Somerton Man, a man without a name, without a country, and with no clear reason for his death. Generations of detectives, journalists, and everyday people tried to piece together the clues. His strange belongings, the book with a missing page, the handwritten code, and the silent connection to a woman who never fully explained what she knew. By the early 2000s, technology had evolved, and with it came a new hope. Maybe, just maybe, modern science could solve what old-fashioned police work couldn't. For years, the idea of digging up the Somerton Man's body had been discussed, but never approved. His grave sat quietly in West Terrace Cemetery, a place visited often by mystery lovers and true crime followers. But in 2021, after years of campaigning by experts and supporters of the case, South Australian authorities finally gave the green light. More than 70 years after he was buried, the Somerton Man's remains were exhumed for DNA testing. It was a delicate operation. His body had been embalmed and buried in 1949. The hope was that enough DNA could be recovered from bones, teeth, or hair. The goal? To extract his genetic profile and upload it to genealogy databases. This method had already solved dozens of cold cases around the world. One of the key figures behind this effort was Derek Abbott, a professor at the University of Adelaide who had spent nearly 2 decades obsessively studying the case. He wasn't a detective by trade, but he treated the mystery like a lifelong mission. He even teamed up with American forensic genealogist Colleen Fitzpatrick, a pioneer in using family history and DNA to solve unsolved crimes. The work was slow and careful. They started building a family tree using DNA matches from distant cousins, some in Australia, others around the world. It was like finding your way out of a maze by starting from the outside and working in. Piece by piece, name by name, they built possible family lines. And finally, one name stood out. In July 2022, after more than 70 years of silence, the Somerton Man had a name: Carl Charles Webb. He was born in 1905 in Melbourne, Victoria. He was an electrical engineer, a poet, and a man who had largely disappeared from the historical record. There was no evidence that he had been reported missing. In fact, no one in his family had known what happened to him. He had simply vanished. Carl Webb had been going through a rough period in his life. He was separated from his wife, Dorothy. There were signs of emotional and mental stress. He had also written poetry that hinted at feelings of loneliness and finality. The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, the book found linked to his death, was a collection that had inspired him. He had copied parts of it by hand in earlier years. The phrase Tamam Shud, it is finished, felt even more personal now. But while the identification gave him a name, it didn't answer every question. Why did Carl Webb travel to Adelaide? Did he plan to take his own life? Was he trying to find someone? And what was his connection, if any, to Jo Thompson, the woman who lived just a few hundred meters from where his body was found? Some researchers believe that Carl may have been trying to reconnect with someone, perhaps Jo herself. There is no clear evidence they knew each other, but the coincidence is hard to ignore. Both lived in the same era. Both had artistic and literary interests. And her reaction to seeing the cast of his face in 1949 still lingers in the memories of those who were there. Did she recognize him and choose to say nothing? Or was it simply the shock of seeing a dead man who resembled someone she once knew? Then there's the code, the strange letters written inside the Rubaiyat. After years of analysis, many now believe it wasn't a spy code at all, but rather a form of private poetry or shorthand. Carl Webb liked writing verse. The letters might have been reminders to himself, fragments of thoughts or phrases he never finished. Or maybe it really was code, something only he could understand. We may never know. What is clear now is that the Somerton Man was not a spy, at least not in the way many people imagined. He was a man in pain, a man lost in time, a man whose identity was wiped away not by enemies or governments, but by silence and distance. He had no children, no one searching for him, and no one who ever claimed his body. His story could have ended quietly, without answers, if not for decades of curiosity, science, and perseverance. His identification brought a kind of peace. It gave him back his name, and with it his place in history, not just as a mystery, but as a person. Carl Webb, a man who lived, who struggled, and who died alone on a beach far from home. Tamam Shud, it is finished. But for those who have followed this case for decades, the search was never just about a name. It was about the power of questions, the strength of human memory, and the deep desire to understand the lives of those who vanish into the shadows of history. We may never know everything about what happened on that beach in 1948, but we now know who he was. Here's a real photo of the unknown man Carl Webb as he was found that morning on Somerton Beach. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel AI Alvanis for more true crime mysteries, solved cold cases, and the strange stories the world never forgets. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.